What if the relentless pursuit of living your best life, that mantra 1,000 gurus and influencers chant, is the very thing making you deeply, profoundly miserable? Pause on that for a moment. All the striving, the goal setting, the endless chase for more happiness, more success, more validation. What if it's all a beautifully packaged trap? It's a radical thought, one that cuts against the grain of everything we're told. But over 150 years ago, a philosopher with a reputation for unblinking honesty, Arthur Schopenhauer, laid out a vision of human existence that suggested just that. He wasn't interested in easy answers or comforting illusions. He looked life straight in the eye, saw its inherent struggles, and from that unflinching gaze, offered what might be one of the most counterintuitive, yet potentially liberating guides in navigating our often chaotic reality. So, if you're tired of the pressure, the endless cycle of desire and disappointment, and you're looking for a different kind of wisdom, a path to freedom paved not with wishful thinking, but with stark, unvarnished truth, then you're in the right place. Today, we're unlocking Schopenhauer's guide to living a more authentic life, not by adding more to your plate, but perhaps by understanding what needs to be taken away. Let's talk about Mark. Mark is, by many accounts, doing okay. He has a decent job, a circle of friends, a list of achievements he's diligently ticked off. He reads the articles, listens to the podcasts, and tries to implement all the advice on how to be happier, more productive, more fulfilled. He sets ambitious goals, pushes himself, and tells himself he should be content. But if Mark were truly honest, in those quiet moments when the noise of the day fades, he'd admit to a persistent, gnawing feeling, a sense that he's constantly running on a treadmill, chasing a horizon that never gets closer. The expectations weigh on him like a physical burden. The expectations from his boss to always exceed targets, from his family to follow a certain path, from society to embody a particular image of success. And perhaps the heaviest of all, the expectations he heaps upon himself. Fueled by an idealized vision of what his life ought to look like, he sees others, or at least the curated versions they present, seemingly gliding through life, effortlessly happy. And he wonders, what am I doing wrong? Why isn't this working for me? The more he strives, the more elusive genuine peace feels. He's caught in a cycle, a flicker of hope with each new endeavor, followed by the familiar dull ache of disappointment when it doesn't deliver that promised, lasting satisfaction. Mark's predicament, this quiet desperation masked by outward striving, would have been no surprise to Arthur Schopenhauer. In fact, Schopenhauer might have looked at Mark with a knowing, perhaps even sympathetic, gaze and said, "Ah, yes, you're caught in the relentless churn of the will." Now, the will, for Schopenhauer, isn't about simple willpower or conscious decision-making as we typically understand it. It's something much deeper, a blind, incessant, metaphysical force that underpins all of existence. Think of it as an insatiable cosmic striving, a constant hunger that animates everything, from the smallest particle to the most complex human desires. And we as human beings are its most sophisticated, and therefore often its most tortured manifestations. This will, according to Schopenhauer, is the ultimate source of our suffering. Why? Because it's fundamentally a force of endless wanting, of dissatisfaction. The moment one desire is fulfilled, another one immediately springs up to take its place. It's a game we can't win by its own rules. The expectations Mark feels, both internal and external, are, in Schopenhauer's view, just individual expressions of this relentless, universal will pushing him ever onward towards goals that can only offer fleeting, illusory satisfaction. It sounds bleak, doesn't it? And this is often where Schopenhauer gets his pessimist label. But here's where it gets interesting and where the unexpected guide begins to emerge. Schopenhauer believed that by understanding this fundamental nature of reality, by truly grasping how the system of striving and expectation works, we can actually find a path to a unique kind of freedom, a way to lessen our suffering and live more authentically, not by changing the world, necessarily, but by changing our relationship to our own desires and expectations. So, how do we even begin to loosen the grip of this all-powerful will and the expectations it breeds? What practical, if unconventional, wisdom did Schopenhauer offer for someone like Mark, or for any of us feeling caught in that same exhausting cycle? That's what we're here to explore. And the first step, as we'll see, involved a radical kind of honesty about the nature of happiness itself. So we met Mark, trapped in a relentless cycle of expectation and disappointment, a cycle Schopenhauer diagnosed as the work of the will, that insatiable cosmic striving that animates us all. It's a stark picture, this idea that we're driven by a force that inherently breeds dissatisfaction. But understanding the diagnosis is the first step towards finding any kind of remedy. And to truly grasp Schopenhauer's unique path to freedom, we need to look unflinchingly at what he had to say about two things we spend our lives wrestling with: desire and happiness. Imagine you have a terrible headache. The pain is all-consuming. Then you take a painkiller, and gradually the headache subsides. That moment of relief, that absence of pain, it feels good, doesn't it? For Schopenhauer, that's essentially what we call happiness or pleasure. It's not so much a positive state in itself, but rather the temporary cessation of a pre-existing suffering, a desire momentarily quelled. He argued that suffering, in its many forms, from physical pain to emotional longing, frustration, and boredom, is a fundamental, default state of conscious existence. Happiness, on the other hand, is purely negative. It's the brief pause when one form of suffering, an unfulfilled desire, gives way. But because the will is an ever-wanting force, this pause is always short-lived. A new desire, a new source of potential suffering, is always waiting in the wings. Schopenhauer famously used the analogy of a pendulum. He said life swings like a pendulum, backward and forward between pain and boredom. When we desire something we don't have, a new job, a relationship, a particular achievement, we are in a state of pain, of longing. If we achieve it, the pain of that specific desire vanishes. But what happens then? Often, after a brief period of satisfaction, a new feeling creeps in: boredom, emptiness, the now what syndrome. And so, the will quickly serves up a new desire, and the pendulum swings back toward the anticipation and potential pain of striving once more. Think about how this relates to the expectations Mark, or any of us, might hold. We expect that achieving X, Y, or Z will bring us lasting happiness. We build our lives around these expectations. But if Schopenhauer is right, we're essentially expecting a temporary state of relief to become a permanent fixture. We're chasing a fleeting ghost. When Mark got that promotion he worked so hard for, the initial elation was real, but it was a relief from the striving for the promotion. Soon enough, the demands of the new role, or a desire for the next step, or a completely unrelated dissatisfaction would have emerged that will simply found a new outlet. Does this resonate with your own experience? Think about the last big thing you really wanted and then achieved. How long did that pure, unadulterated joy last before new anxieties, desires, or simply a sense of restless boredom began to surface? Be honest. This perspective is, without a doubt, challenging. It directly contradicts a popular narrative that happiness is a positive goal we can achieve and maintain through effort and positive thinking. And it's here that many label Schopenhauer a pessimist and turn away. But what if this pessimism is actually a form of profound realism? What if accepting this more sober view of happiness is the first crucial step towards genuine freedom from its relentless and often futile pursuit? For Schopenhauer, trying to build a life around a constant acquisition of positive, happy moments is like trying to build a house on quicksand. The very nature of desire ensures that such a foundation can never be stable. He wasn't saying we shouldn't experience joy or relief. He was simply pointing out their transient nature and the suffering that arises when we cling to them or make them our ultimate aim. Understanding this negative conception of happiness, that is primarily the absence of suffering, is key to this guide. It begins to shift our focus. If lasting, positive happiness is an illusion, then perhaps the more attainable and worthy goal is the minimization of suffering. If we can't fill our lives with perpetual sunshine, perhaps we can learn to build better shelters from rain. This doesn't mean resigning ourselves to a miserable existence. Quite the contrary. It means getting smarter about how we engage with our desires and expectations. It means understanding the game, so we're no longer its unwitting pawn. Mark's constant disappointment isn't a personal failing. It's a predictable outcome of the system he doesn't yet fully comprehend. By realizing that the goalposts are designed to constantly move, he can start to question whether he needs to keep sprinting towards them in the same way. So, if the direct pursuit of happiness through fulfilling endless desires is a setup for disappointment, and will constantly propels us into this cycle, are we simply stuck? Is there no escape from this pendulum swing between pain and boredom? Or did Schopenhauer, having painted this stark landscape, also offer us a map to find oases of peace, moments of genuine respite from the tyranny of the will? He did. And those paths, as we'll explore, involve a radical reorientation of our attention and our values. So, if life, according to Schopenhauer, is this constant oscillation between the ache of unfulfilled desire and the emptiness of boredom, are we simply doomed to swing with it endlessly? Is there no way to slow the pendulum, to find moments where the relentless demands of the will loosen their grip? Fortunately, Schopenhauer, the supposed arch-pessimist, believed there were. He pointed to certain experiences, certain states of mind, that can act as temporary sanctuaries, offering us a precious respite and a taste of a different kind of existence. The first, and perhaps the most immediate for us right now, lies in the very act of understanding itself, in philosophical contemplation. Think about it. By grasping Schopenhauer's ideas, by seeing the mechanisms of the will at play in our own lives, something shifts. When you recognize that your constant striving for the next thing, that nagging feeling of dissatisfaction, isn't just your personal failing, but a manifestation of a universal principle, there's an odd kind of liberation in that. It's like seeing the strings on a puppet. Once you see them, the puppet's dance, while still happening, no longer holds the same unthinking power over you. For Schopenhauer, this kind of knowledge, this intellectual insight into the nature of reality, allows us to rise, even if just for a moment, above our own individual, will-driven perspective. We become, in his terms, a clear mirror of the world, observing the human condition with a degree of detachment, rather than being completely swept away by our personal desires and fears. This doesn't eliminate the will, but it creates a space of knowing, and in that knowing, a certain peace can be found. Our friend Mark, for instance, upon learning about these ideas, might not magically solve all his problems, but he might stop blaming himself so harshly for feeling dissatisfied. He might see his struggle not as proof of his inadequacy, but as part of a shared human drama, and that understanding alone can lighten the load considerably. But Schopenhauer pointed to an even more profound, more immersive sanctuary, the experience of aesthetic contemplation. This is the experience of losing yourself completely in the perception of beauty, whether it's in art, music, or even the natural world. Have you ever been so captivated by a piece of music that the world around you, your worries, your to-do list, simply faded away? Or stood before a breathtaking landscape, a majestic mountain range, or a turbulent ocean, and felt a sense of awe that momentarily silenced your inner chatter? Or perhaps you've been absorbed in a powerful painting or a profound piece of literature, feeling a deep connection that transcended your everyday concerns. According to Schopenhauer, in these moments of pure aesthetic absorption, something miraculous happens. Our individual will, with its selfish cravings and anxieties, falls silent. We are no longer thinking about what this beautiful thing can do for us, how it benefits us, or what we want from it. Instead, we become what he called a pure, will-less subject of knowledge. We are simply perceiving, contemplating, being with the object of beauty, untroubled by the demands of our personal ego. For Schopenhauer, music was the highest of all arts because he believed it bypassed ideas and directly mirrored the movements of the will itself. Its striving, its sorrows, its fleeting joys, allowing us to perceive this fundamental essence of reality without being personally entangled in its demands. When we truly listen to music, he thought, we are for a time free from the torture of willing. Imagine Mark, overwhelmed by his career pressures and personal expectations. What if he rediscovers a passion for playing an instrument he abandoned years ago? Or what if he starts taking walks in nature, truly allowing himself to be absorbed by the intricate beauty of forest or the vastness of the sky? In those moments, Schopenhauer would say, Mark isn't Mark, the striving professional with a list of unmet goals. He is simply a perceiving consciousness, momentarily liberated from the tyranny of his individual will. These aren't solutions to his problems in a practical sense, But they are vital escapes, moments of genuine peace that recharge the spirit and offer a different perspective. Now, Schopenhauer was clear. For most of us, these moments of aesthetic contemplation and intellectual insight are, indeed, temporary respites. The will is a powerful force, and its demands inevitably creep back in. The peace found in a beautiful symphony eventually fades as the concerns of daily life reassert themselves. But the value of these sanctuaries, however fleeting, is immense. They're like oases in a desert, reminding us that another way of experiencing the world, free from the constant pressure of wanting, is possible. They offer a glimpse of the calm that lies beyond the storm of our desires. These pathways offer solace, a way to manage the inherent suffering of existence by temporarily transcending our will-driven nature. But this naturally leads to a deeper question. Are these fleeting moments of peace the best we can hope for? Or did Schopenhauer, in his unflinching examination of life, point toward a more enduring, perhaps more radical, way to find freedom from the will's dominion? What if understanding and aesthetic contemplation are just the first steps on a path toward a more profound and lasting form of tranquility? Schopenhauer certainly thought so, and his answers take us deeper into the heart of what it means to live an authentic, if challenging, life. The peace found in understanding, the solace of art and music. These are invaluable gifts, windows into a state of being free from the will's constant urgings. But for Schopenhauer, these were often glimpses, not the final destination. If the will is the fundamental source of all striving and suffering, then a more lasting tranquility would require a more radical engagement with it. He pointed towards two interconnected paths that lead to this deeper liberation: the cultivation of profound compassion and the ultimate unsettling calm found in what he termed the denial of the will to live. Let's first talk about compassion. For Schopenhauer, true ethical behavior doesn't arise from rules or reason alone, but from a deep, intuitive recognition of a fundamental truth, that the suffering we experience is shared by all living beings. He believed that the sense of ourselves as isolated individuals, separate from everyone and everything else, is an illusion created by what he called the principium individuationis, the principle of individuation. Beneath this veil of separateness, we are all manifestations of the one and the same striving, suffering will. When we genuinely feel compassion, mitleid, or suffering with, we pierce through this veil. For a moment, the boundaries of our own ego dissolve. We see another's pain not just as a problem, but as an expression of the universal suffering that also touches us. In that recognition, our own selfish desires, our personal anxieties and strivings, temporarily recede in importance. We are moved not by what we want, but by a desire to alleviate the suffering of another, which is, in a profound sense, our own suffering. Think of Mark again. If he starts to look beyond his own frustrated ambitions and truly connect with the struggles of those around him, his colleagues, his friends, even strangers, Schopenhauer would say he's taking a significant step. This isn't about a calculated act of charity for self-benefit. It's about a genuine upwelling of fellow feeling. In these moments of compassion, the focus shifts from the demands of his individual will to a broader, shared experience. This, Schopenhauer believed, naturally diminishes the power of his own egoistic strivings and the suffering they entail. It's a subtle turning away from the self, and in that turning, there is peace. This path of compassion, this recognition of shared suffering, can lead to an even more profound state: the denial of the will to live. Now, this is perhaps Schopenhauer's most misunderstood and challenging concept. It does not mean suicide. In fact, Schopenhauer viewed suicide as an affirmation of the will, a desperate act born from the will's frustration that life isn't meeting its demands. The person who resorts to suicide doesn't renounce willing. They will an end to their suffering, but they are still caught in the will's grip. The denial of the will, as Schopenhauer envisioned it, is something far more radical. It's a conscious, profound turning away from the will's incessant demands altogether. It arises when an individual, through deep insight and often profound suffering, either their own or witnessed through compassion, sees the futility of all striving, the illusory nature of all worldly pleasures, and the endless cycle of desire and pain. At this point, the will, in a sense, turns against itself. The individual ceases to affirm life as this endless wanting. They no longer cling to desires, ambitions, or even to their own individual existence with the same desperate intensity. This often manifests as a life of asceticism, voluntary renunciation, quiet resignation, and profound detachment. Think of the saints, mystics, and ascetics across various spiritual traditions whom Schopenhauer admired. It's not a state of miserable deprivation, as it might appear from the outside. Instead, Schopenhauer described it as a state of heavenly peace, a profound and unsettling calm that comes when the inner storm of willing has finally subsided. It's the ultimate freedom. Not freedom to get what you want, but freedom from wanting itself. This is Schopenhauer's ultimate vision of an authentic life. One lived in full, unblinking awareness of the will's nature and its inherent link to suffering, leading to a conscious choice to no longer be its slave. Authenticity here isn't about finding your passion or expressing your unique self in the way modern culture often frames it. If those passions and expressions are just new channels for the same old will, it's about a radical disidentification from ego and its endless demands. Now, this path of complete denial is undoubtedly extreme, and Schopenhauer himself acknowledged its rarity. He wasn't necessarily prescribing it as a lifestyle for everyone. So, how does this guide apply to those of us living ordinary lives, not ready to become hermits or saints? The value lies in understanding the direction these ideas point. Even if we don't fully deny the will, we can still cultivate a greater degree of detachment from our desires. We can question the urgency of our ambitions. We can practice small acts of renunciation, consciously choosing not to chase every fleeting pleasure, not to be consumed by every frustration. We can deepen our compassion, actively working to see beyond our own egocentric view of the world. These practices, inspired by Schopenhauer's more extreme examples, can incrementally reduce the will's power over us, leading to greater peace and a more authentic alignment with the deeper truths of existence as he saw them. They are steps toward freeing ourselves from the crushing weight of unexamined expectations. This vision of freedom, born from compassion and a radical detachment from our own desires, is undeniably profound, yet it can also seem incredibly daunting, almost alien to our everyday experience of striving and engagement with the world. How then do we synthesize these stark insights? How can we integrate Schopenhauer's challenging guide into our lives in a way that is both honest as philosophy and livable for us? Is there a balanced wisdom, a practical takeaway that can help us navigate our expectations and find that elusive authenticity, even amidst the demands of the modern world? Our exploration of Schopenhauer's thought has taken us from the common anxieties of someone like Mark, burdened by expectations, to the very metaphysical roots of desire and suffering. We've seen how he viewed happiness not as a positive attainment, but as a fleeting relief from pain, and life itself as a pendulum swinging between that pain and an equally dissatisfying boredom, all orchestrated by the insatiable, cosmic will. He then showed us fleeting sanctuaries, moments of intellectual clarity and aesthetic absorption where the will's clamor could temporarily subside. And finally, he pointed toward more profound, if demanding, paths to a deeper peace. The expansive empathy of true compassion, and the ultimate quietude found in denial of the will, a radical turning away from life's incessant wanting. It's a lot to take in, and if you're feeling a bit unsettled, perhaps even resistant, that's perfectly understandable. Schopenhauer philosophy isn't meant to be a comforting lullaby. It's more like a bracing splash of cold water, meant to awaken us to the often uncomfortable realities of our existence. But within this stark honesty lies his most valuable, if uncomfortable, gift, a pathway to a more resilient and authentic form of freedom. So, how do we integrate this into our lives without necessarily retreating into asceticism? Schopenhauer's guide isn't about a rigid set of rules, but about cultivating a fundamental shift in perspective. First, embrace radical honesty about your desires and expectations. Understand, as Schopenhauer did, that many of them are programmed by the will and by societal conditioning, and that their fulfillment will likely not bring the lasting happiness you imagine. This doesn't mean suppressing all desires, but examining them, questioning their urgency, and detaching your core sense of self-worth from their attainment. When Mark begins to see his ambition not as a purely rational drive, but as an echo of the will, he gains power over it. Second, actively seek and cherish those will-less states. Make time for art, for music, for nature, for deep learning, not as distractions or hobbies, but as vital nourishment for the soul. These are the moments when you can experience joy and peace without the attachment and inevitable disappointment that comes from fulfilled egoistic desires. They are proof that another mode of being is possible. Third, cultivate compassion, genuinely. Recognize the shared struggle in others. By shifting focus from your own insatiable will to the experiences of those around you, you not only alleviate their suffering, but also diminish the intensity of your own ego-driven anxieties. This fosters connection and a sense of shared humanity that transcends individual striving. Fourth, practice a gentle form of denial or non-attachment. This isn't about harsh self-deprivation, but about mindfully choosing not to be enslaved by every impulse or societal pressure. It could be as simple as resisting an unnecessary purchase, letting go of a petty resentment, or choosing quiet contemplation over constant stimulation. Each small act of stepping back from the will's immediate command strengthens your inner freedom. Schopenhauer's guide, ultimately, redefines what it means to live authentically and freely. Freedom, in his world, isn't about achieving unlimited power to satisfy every whim. It's about achieving freedom from the tyranny of those whims, freedom from a crushing weight of insatiable expectations. Authenticity isn't about crafting the perfect idealized self to present to the world. It's about living in courageous alignment with the deep, sometimes difficult, truths of our shared human condition. His philosophy doesn't promise a life devoid of pain or struggle. He would call it a delusion. Instead, it offers the tools to navigate that struggle with greater wisdom, resilience, and a profound, if somber, sense of peace. It teaches us that by understanding the nature of our suffering, by managing our expectations, and by detaching from the relentless churn of the will, we can find a quiet clearing, an authentic space where we are no longer merely puppets of desire, but conscious participants in the strange, challenging, and sometimes beautiful drama of existence. Perhaps Schopenhauer's most enduring lesson is this: true contentment doesn't come from getting everything we think we want, but from a radical reevaluation of wanting itself. And in that reevaluation, in that uncomfortable but liberating truth, lies a path to a life lived with a deeper, more steadfast authenticity. The choice, as always, is ours to explore.